Hello everyone and welcome to ZankCast, where we interview members of the Bay community. This time we have a blader that thinks outside of the box. The creator of the Plastic Database, a veteran WBO player. We have Think from the WBO.
Hi, I'm more than happy to be here.
Alright, thanks so much for being here. So, obviously, a first question, just a little bit of an icebreaker. Just introduce yourself to viewers who are wondering about yourself.
Well, I mean, I'm from Perth, Western Australia. I've been Beyblading since they basically landed. Love it more than pretty much any other hobby I've had, and I've had a few hobbies. I enjoy experimenting with Beyblades, and I enjoy being part of the community. I get so much satisfaction out of being able to work with like such a broad range of people, and seeing a lot of joy come from Beyblade. So it's always great to be part of the game.
No, that's awesome, man. So I wanted to ask, how did you get introduced to the series? What got you into it?
Okay, so my cousin he told me he got these cool spinning tops, and he had a green one and a red one, a roller, a TAKARA, and a Galsley. And they had cool stars in the boxes for stats. I was like, oh, that's really, really neat. So I got my mum to get me some spinning tops. Did not get Beyblades at first. Got these weird little things that had this square launching thing that you could squeeze the prongs on, and then it would drop just a really boring spinning top. But they had stars on them. Yeah, so they didn't stick for long. And at my next birthday, I got a Dronza S, a Dragoon S, and a Galsley myself, because those were the parts that had the most stars plus less spin gear. It's all about the stars. I've always been very interested in the stats, which may not have been the most accurate, but that's what really got me into it. My cousin was playing with them. I wanted to play with them, so I got those and got a stadium, and then I'd play every weekend with my dad.
I know, man. That's cool. So then, how did you get into the WBO? Because you eventually became an organizer.
Yeah, I found the WBO. I was looking for old Beyblades, just on a whim. Like a decade ago, and I hadn't heard anything about Metal Fight. I didn't really watch much TV. Haven't really watched a lot of TV since I was a kid. And I saw there were these new Beyblades, and that's interesting. So I wanted to know what was good, what would be like a good competitive part, and figured I'd answer a lot of questions like, were the stars accurate? As we may know, in fact, they are not, and they don't even seem to really bother with them on half the packs anymore. And so I was like, okay, so what should I buy? And I looked at those, got myself, I think I bought a Dragoon G at the time, back when they were $10. But I bought myself a few Beyblades that it turned out were at the supermarkets, where I also just hadn't really looked. By reading recommendations on the World Beyblade organization, I read posts by users like McFrown, who isn't around anymore, and Dan, who very much is around now, and one of my very good friends. And that really got me into Beyblade again. I was sort of drawn in by the community, and the fact there was this whole sort of experimental sort of aspect to it, where people were experimenting and building combos and posting about them, and there was a tension there, but there was also this sort of desire to discover things, and I found that really engaging. So I gravitated towards the site pretty heavily over it's not like there was much else, but over the wiki at the time, which wasn't part of the WBO, and then I wanted to play with other people, so I initially tried to convince someone else in Perth to do the organising, but it's traditionally just been me. There was one tournament not hosted by me that I didn't make it to, but most of the time I organise just because I feel like playing, or I want to, and a lot of the time it's because I want to prove that something works in an actual tournament.
Mm-hmm. I think something that you talked about that I think is true, and that's part of the fun of the WBO, is that the community is very collaborative when they can, on combinations and all that stuff. And I think what's really nice about it, is the fact that a lot of times, even like with burst, people discover stuff that would be like surprising, like part viability, like some stuff. I know
Exactly.
you've done quite a bit. Like just discovering how potentially random stuff could work, or even stuff that could work but people slept on, I think is really important, because I feel like kind of the issue, kind of part with WBO cultures also, is that they're the people who do the testings, like the actual work, and there's people like base everything on the winning combos.
Which, like, time, and you get a lot of echo chamber with that.
I've noticed this so many times. It's basically that, and I've been guilty of this too, but a lot of times people will just like look at the winning combinations, and that's like their sole opinion on it. And it's like, well, there's a little bit more to it.
Exactly. Like, there's a point where you can look at the winning combinations and be like, hey, this thing's probably maybe they're a little too much, when every list is the same. Something's a little bit of going on now. But like, when you just see like it's just people just reusing the same things as what they see, like there was with Bury and I Extend plus Dash, when there were things like Moment Around that and Never, which you were a big fan of, that just blitz them like in both directions a lot of the time. You do see a bit of an echo chamber effect, and I mean, I can't expect everyone to sit down and do the test themselves. Everyone has busy lives. Not that like you and me don't. You're spending how much of your day recording videos and doing whatever doing the rest of the stuff you do. And like, I'm working, have like family commitments and so on. But at the same time, I think when people start parroting stuff without actually doing the testing themselves, and just like, no, bearing dash is the driver. It's like, not really. Maybe you should be trying some other stuff.
Yeah, I definitely think you hit it on the nail with like the echo chamber effect. I feel like a lot of people have been kind of guilty of this. And the issue with this is that if you don't do stuff, for an example, like experimental event, or even trying out something ranked, and you just kind of have a quitter mentality, that is not good for the game or healthy at all. Because our goal at the end of the day for WBO is like, we all work together. So like, if let's say OP says, okay, we're going to try this, and everyone goes, I don't want to play at that event. If you don't want to play, because there's two problems to this, because if it's ranked and you just don't want to lose points, okay. And then after it's not ranked. There's
a big conversation we had about ranked.
Yeah, because then after, when it's not ranked, they don't want to play because it's not ranked. And that's the issue, is that if there's a reason to not go to the event and it's like something personal, I think that's perfectly valid and fine. But if, let's say, you have the chance to go to an event and your sole reason is like the goddamn rank, please, I'm begging.
Yeah, no, chill. Like, I think rank's important. Rank's important. It's what we were found around. Like, having that system there is really important to measure who's the best blader. But if you're like, you're not a good blader if you're skipping events because they're something you're not necessarily as good at, and you're not a good blader if you're only going to play ranked, because like, have some fun. Like, it's not all about the magic number. It's not all about the funny digits under your name or next to your name, wherever it is on the website now. It's, we're here to play Beyblade and have a good time together. I mean, at the same time, going back to the echo chamber, like, there's that, and then there's the other side where where there is a problem and everybody want to be like, oh no, it doesn't, this beats it, or no, it doesn't, for whatever reason. And it's a lot of it seems to be the community seems to oscillate violently in one direction or the other, where there's an echo chamber of nothing's a problem and an echo chamber of everything's a problem. Panic. And yeah, it's kind of crazy. We're in a period of that at the moment, but I think we got to remember we're all here to have fun playing Beyblade, and that's the same, tying it back to the rank thing. We're all here to have fun playing Beyblade, and that should be our first priority, is make sure everyone's having fun.
Yeah, I agree. I try to attend whatever. You can probably see in my profile, like, I've gotten bodied up like, big events by like random kids. And those are things I don't care about. Like, obviously, I'll care, like, sucks, I lost, whatever. But, like, that's it. Because, like, the biggest wake-up call for anybody on the WBO should be this. The ranking of 15 BR or whatever does not pay any bills, does not do anything. It's just a little number. It's not that
exactly.
Deep,
Shin says we can't eat Bay rank, and he's completely right.
I honestly, before I was kind of on the fence, and then after I agreed with Shindal completely, because I feel the mentality has been so hyper focused on ranked. Like, ranked should just be at the end of the day, like, hey, this is like a cool thing,
It's a cool, it's a cool thing. It's not like, yeah, exactly. If you're top 15, that's sick. You get a cool little bit on your profile, or top 5, whatever it is. When you get there's a special bit you get for being top 5, and like that's an achievement. But like, it's just a cool number. Don't sweat about losing. Like if you've been, maybe we expand it so you get a bit for top 10, rather than just top 5, and then that's your achievement. You've done it, right? It's not something you need to be like, oh well, I've got to maintain blah 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 blah. You've been there. You've been in the top 10 players in the world. Be happy. Don't sweat about like dropping a little bit.
The issue.
Don't hit top 5 and retire.
Oh, sorry. No, I was going to say, the issue with a lot of players that do this, and I have grown out of this, is that you got to stop caring about rank, because the issue that people fall under is that they become hyper-focused on rank to where they don't enjoy the game anymore. And they keep on doing this, and it gets worse and worse and worse and toxic. And listen, I can understand the perspective, you're at the top, it feels good, whatever, but at the end of the day, it's Beyblade. A random kid.
We're playing with these, Chief. Like, calm.
Yeah. A random kid can beat anybody who's at the top. That should humble anybody.
Well, that's why we introduced deck. We got to stop that.
Yeah.
It used to happen all the time too. Before we had deck, like random kid phenomenon used to just blitz people. We'd have people beating like K or whatever at events, and they'd be like 8 years old. And that's good. I love that. I love seeing kids get really far just because they're naturally good, or they just, they have a bit of luck, or they're just good. Like this kid at my class who's really good. I love seeing him succeed.
Yeah. And I think part of the benefit of hosting to the events here in Toronto that I've at least done for me is that I do see a lot of new players. And really the cool thing in saying that is that just because someone is new doesn't mean they're going to be bad. And I treat every player like equally in the sense that they could beat me. This could be my toughest match, because it's like giving like general respect to like the competition, right? I don't go, listen, if there could be some kid has chain Corbeus HASBRO, maybe they could beat me. I don't know how. Maybe I self-KO, right?
Yeah. We had Emperor Fornius placed at one of our events, and it beat some stuff. It just had better life after death than some of the common stuff, and they self-KO'd. Like, it getis there. Sometimes it just happens.
Yeah, because I did a 3-on-3, and I was against the kid at Emperor Fornius HASBRO. I had Guilty NXS, too many inside of the wall saves, and I was like, oh, maybe I don't use Guilty now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God. Yeah, no, it happens, man. It happens. Sometimes you just get got.
So the next thing I want to ask you is actually, because it's kind of like a legendary story every time I heard about you, was kind of like the Metal Fury Scythe. I kind of want to know the backstory to that.
Okay. The backstory is really long. I think I have a Metal Fury Scythe here. I kept a couple of things on my desk just in case. So Metal Fury Scythe is very round, very wide, rather edge distributed, and it has these big old contact points. Now, Metal Fight Limited is very near and dear to me, and I think at the time all of this happened, a lot of people didn't really understand why I was so, protective of the format. But Limited has always sort of been my baby. So I started off with the concept quite a while before it happened, and I talked about it a bit on the forums. And then another member called Inglet, who was a moderator, back before moderators were full staff, they were like this sort of like half-life. I think technically we're all actually the moderator role now, but they had no input on like competitive stuff. But Inglet approached me, and Inglet was possibly one of the smartest people we've had on staff. He's absolute genius. And he approached me and said, hey, I saw you'd been talking about this. I've been thinking about it. Do you want to sort of have a look, and can we go over how far you've got? So I sort of shared my notes, and we talked about making a real thing. And he said he'd take it up with the staff and sort of do the presentation, the idea to them. When this wasn't really a thing, we hadn't had a format like this. We'd just been following basically the manufacturer up until then. And, there was an issue with Boot Disc 145 and Basalt having basically outclassed everything that came before them. So there was this sort of demand there that people wanted, and those were the things people had. So I then spent a month. There was Dan and Raigeko 13 and a couple others were also involved to some extent, but I spent a good couple months testing, including a holiday I went on to the Margaret River region, which is a very nice tourist area around here, that I spent mostly in a room with metal fight Beyblades, balancing a format and writing a ban list. My mother was very distressed. Only recently did I tell her what came of it, and now she's a little bit more understanding. So I wrote this ban list, and that ban list, the second to last revision is letter for letter what the launch ban list of Limited was. We had it called Resurrection or Revolution with like capital RE for style, which I still think was much better. So I sort of had done the balancing for it. The only issue was there were a few parts I didn't have. I didn't have a lot of 0G parts. I don't think any of them ended up being a problem. Not even Dark Knight. But I didn't have the Metal Fury parts. They weren't really released here, or they weren't at that time, but I don't know if they were released here at all. And shortly after we started, obviously, I went to order a duo, and I don't remember, there was another one I was going to order, but I went to order a duo. A Beat. Beat was the other one, which ended up being pretty mediocre. I ordered the duo, and then someone said, hey, hold on, I've got this Metal Fury scythe, and it's beating everything at stamina. I'm like, okay, I'll get one of those. So I got it, and it was beating everything at stamina. I was like, okay, well, that's a little bit much. I was hoping for something like, the Earthburn and Metal Fury Duo and Libra all sort of ended up around the same with Flame and so on. So I was like, oh, that's not really great. And then I tried it for defense, and I couldn't knock it out. Nothing's unkillable, but it was hard. It was the best defensive thing in the format, same height, and if you hit it from above, it would just knock you right back up with those massive scythes. And then I tried for attack, and it just knocked stuff out all day long. And so we had this wheel that was just the best at everything. So I immediately went and messaged and told Inglet, and I told Kay. Now, Kay, going back to caring about rank, Kay has become... I shouldn't talk this about someone that I work with, but Kay post caring about rank is infinitely is such a more enjoyable person to work with, and I think he has a lot more sort of care about the game. Back then, though, he was a little bit how do you say, bloodthirsty. At least that's how I felt about him. I don't know if he was. That's how I felt about him. Anyway, I sent him my concerns and some combos that were a concern, and he didn't really reply. I didn't get much response from anyone on it. I said, look, we need to ban this. I posted a bunch saying we really need to ban this. Anime North, I think it was coming around. I was like, we need to do this. This is going to be Limited's big like breakout moment at Anime North. Anime North was our mecca at that point. It was our Beyblade World Championships. And I miss us running those. And nothing happened. And Kay topped the event with a combo that I gave him. Now, Kay tested a lot. Maybe he tested that one. But I saw that as letting Limited lie for the personal gain and belittling the format, as well as the fact that I had built this format, handed it to them, which... we had rubber sharp on the ban list, and that was something that only I would have cooked up, and that was specifically so people would start using right spin attack from the get-go, because before that we were just using lightning. And I felt that, I provided this thing. I'd taken no credit, which is obviously why no one really knew about this till I came back. It's like, oh, yeah, I did that. So I got no... I didn't really care about the credit, but I did really care that, I felt that I'd been sort of just discarded at that point. So I called him out for it and got told promptly by another staff member to shut up I'm pretty sure those words. And I told him, I don't remember exactly what I said back. The posts are very much still up though. But I basically told him to go screw himself and copped a warning up to 90%. And then I quit. I just said, nah. That's all I need. Like, if this is how we're going to act and this is how the organization wants to respond, I don't care to be a part of it anymore. And I got an apology. The warning was revoked on my next birthday after that, actually.
Good gift.
Yeah. I still didn't come back though. Even Brad, who at that time was not active, we continually missed each other. I arrived as he left. He came back shortly after I left. and then I came back shortly after he left. So we barely ever get to talk. Even he messaged me and was like, hey, you know, we're really sad you've left, blah, 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 which was very touching. But I was very much done. So, yeah, Limited I'm still proud of Limited, but the Psy thing was, you know, I am a bit of a drama queen and I do get very worked up over stuff and I'm very bad at respecting authority. But that one was that one was really too much for me and I was just like, oh, that's it. Yeah. And then I gave up for years until Dan, jerk that he is, was like, hey, can I pick your brain about plastics? I know you've still got the database sitting there because I'd been working the database. It was like a good portion done for what I wanted it to be. And I just let that sit as well. And occasionally I just get emails from people either wanting information on plastics, where sometimes if I was in a good mood, I'd be like, yeah. And half the time it's people trying to buy my collection. I was just like, no, Chief, please do not be a vulture. But yeah, and then Dan dragged me back in. But yeah, at the time, I was very much fully intended to be finished over that because, you know, I feel like when you put a lot of effort into something, give it to someone else, there's a point where there's a level of respect that has to be returned. And I'm big on respect being a mutual thing. Right. So yeah. Okay. There's I've still busted. Sorry, big ramble.
Your perspective on Limited, because obviously since you created it, you have a little bit more pride in it, and you don't like to see if, like, because it was your original idea, if they're not kind of listening to your feedback. So I can understand in that regard, definitely. Definitely different time than today. So.
Oh yeah. These days, I like to think we've improved a lot about giving credit.
Yeah. But
if we get 4D done finally, Cake will get credit.
Yeah, no, 100%. So something I wanted to touch on, because you talked about this. So you created a database. You already basically touched on the origin, which is the plastic database. I use this in all my plastic videos. I always mention it.
I'm glad. It's what it's there for.
Because the wiki is very outdated, and obviously...
Oh, God, is it ever?
Like, the first thing I work with Keo on the WBO to try to make sure we got most of it in check, because... People did not care for, like, most of bursts. Like, a lot of the HASBRO stuff has no mentions on the articles. Barely, like, maybe, like, a little bit of the later, maybe part of Cho Z, but there's, like, a lot of dead zone when there shouldn't be. And it could just be basic information, like, don't get this or get this. And,
it was so hard to learn burst, man.
Yeah, and exactly the point. And that's what I was going to say. The database is very good because the wiki just makes up stuff. Like, they made up, like, on the metal fight parts, right? The around sharp, they said, there's actually a second mode where you flip the plate. And that's not true.
No. Oh, God, no. Please don't do that. I mean, I'm sure it's not really any worse than around sharp is already, but please don't do that.
No, but what I was going to say is that the database is very, and I know Dan also did the hard metal system database too. And what's really good about that too is because a lot of this stuff is kind of outdated. Like, even on the content itself, you maybe have people doing testing videos, maybe, but no one was really like at it for content creation. Yeah. So, because the benefit now is that because there's all this technology and all this stuff for a burst, you know, you have me who does testing, you have Dan, Shindog, Wombat, Blake when he used to do tests, you know, you have a lot more people doing it, and people have, like, video reference.
BWQ, yeah.
And what's so important to me about this for competitive is people have a reference point. So reading the text is really good too. And I feel that's, like, it's good too, because also it's like a buyer's guide, basically. You scroll down to the bottom. Overall, yes, no. What I do is that I just do Command F fragile on any of the plastic articles. This may break. Okay, I won't buy it.
Yeah. That's honestly fair until you need. It's like there's a couple of fragile parts that you need, but it's pretty much just roller defense ring. And there's a reason I've, like, 8 of those. There's a seller here who I buy them from, and I'm sure he's like, why does this guy want so many roller defenses? And he doesn't know he's just sending them to their death. Right. I'm getting our friend Broyito to do me, like, a substitute attack ring for that I can use instead of just snapping them constantly. Yeah. And that's. But yeah, the database was. Yeah.
No, the database was a good resource. No, I was going to say, I actually want your opinion on this, because I thought about this quite a bit. I know it's kind of anti-WBO, kind of, but plastics are not going to be around forever. And they're not obviously the most durable in the sense that obviously if you go 10, 20 years from now, that same Dragoon wing's not going to be there. So I'm kind of curious, what is your perspective on like the idea of like 3D print stuff? Because I want to be honest, like I feel like that's kind of the future for a lot of stuff, because Metal Fight I think is the most durable. So I think Metal Fight will still be around even 10 years from now. But even plastics and like bursts particular, like those things die.
Yeah. Burst, I don't know what you can do because I don't know if you can actually print teeth strong enough. I'm still waiting to hear, like, sort of see how things are going there. Plastic, so I am big on 3D prints for, like, I have this SG grip change base from Angry Face. He's still working on the weight a little bit. Huge fan of it. I don't like having, like, I obviously have a ton of plastic parts, one of everything, minimum. And I don't like having an advantage. I'd rather be on a level playing field to get the best feel for like who's come up with the most creative combo, who knows the matchups better. So I'm a big fan of accessibility as far as we can take it, and that includes 3D prints. Massive fan of them. I think in plastics in particular, we've already reached a point, and we reached that point a decade ago, where the game is more accurate with repros than without. That part I just showed does not work. You cannot use it. Here's one here. You'll note that it's broken there.
Oh, yeah.
Here's the attack ring from it. You'll note that it's broken in half. This is Uriel 2. You cannot use it. You cannot assemble it. The base clips will break.
Lord. Oh, is that
that base?
Uriel?
Yeah, Uriel 2, the second one.
Right.
Don't buy it. Don't buy it. Not worth buying. Maybe for the tip once Angry Face gets the little weight stuff figured out. That is my favorite attack base in plastics. Definitely the best for anti-attack sort of stuff, which we don't see a lot of, but because a lot of us don't like to do attack-based attack testing. But it is my favorite plastics attack base.
Right. And
it's also the best grip defense base, and it is completely unusable. It is gone from the metagame because it simply cannot be used. You know, the format is less accurate.
No, I was going to say, there's definitely a point where certain ones, especially because I know there's a difference, TAKARA and HASBRO molds on like the plastic hardness and what's more fragile than other. But I do think like you do have to consider at a certain point, because like even plastics on WBO is not even ranked. So it's like, guys, come on. Even like
guys, chill.
The Tornado Attack Repro, I know there's a process to approve, but I do feel like there are some basic things that are quality of life for the WBO that we should just be saying yes to and not really like debating.
Base clips.
Like
base clips, we should be able to 3D print already. Like they have such a limited impact. As long as it's in line with one of the designs, we should just be able to do it because they break all the time. And when you've got a part like this where the metagame is less accurate for not having 3D prints of it, it's kind of like, what are we staying true to? Yeah, it's not fun, and it's like, what are you staying true to? This isn't accurate. As someone who likes documenting stuff, having an inaccurate metagame isn't what I want. And
I helped Dan do the BB10 repo. He's still working on it, but like
I'm really excited for that.
Right? Like the BB10 is pretty fragile. Like
it is. They're going. Mine lost a chunk of the floor recently. Yeah.
And the thing is with stadiums in particular and how the WBO does it, it's like, okay, I understand legal stadiums, but it's also kind of like there are certain stadiums designed for specific stuff that you got to consider, and some stuff that can be universal. Like the DB stadium, that's really just DB and B. You leave it there, right? I would never think to do like a Metal Fight event. And if I had the option with a hypothetical Shin-TA, BB10 Repro, legal, not obviously you can do anything unranked, or like the DB stadium, right? I'm picking the other two over like the DB stadium. So it's like,
absolutely.
The priorities have to be there.
Exactly. It's about gameplay. And I think we often forget that, you know, we're not here just to help TAKARA TOMY sell products. We're here to have a competitive Beyblade game. We're Fighting Spirits Inc., not TAKARA TOMY.
Oh my God.
We are here to have a competitive Beyblade game. Obviously, I'm not speaking for all the staff on this. I'm probably speaking against a lot of the staff on this, I imagine. But I'm a big fan of reproducing stadiums and even like having, you know, endorsing. I would be fine with the WBO endorsing a non-original stadium, even a non-original stadium design, if it was the best competitive stadium, if it were well balanced for types, had a good tornado ridge, the characteristics we know of that make a good stadium. And I think from what you've mention of the stadium coming out with X, that question may be brought into sharper focus.
After we kind of get through this, because we kind of segue into that.
That's
but the WBBA versus WBO is like the silliest thing. Now, I understand the perspective, and I think it's fair to say, listen, TAKARA is the original. We have to factor this in and try to understand the game. I think that's perfectly fair. And I always think TAKARA should be the base and WBO modifications afterwards.
Absolutely.
And that makes sense. But what people do is that, not everyone, but the prioritize on WBBA sometimes not exactly fair, because a lot of people could say they are pro WBBA. Okay, so then every single standard event should be 5G that they host in the DB stadium, and they can't go question that, because if they truly are the WBBA, they have to follow exactly the store tournaments. And you find out, big surprise, they're not really pro WBBA. They're more like, I like what the WBBA has, but I want to give our take on it.
Exactly. Like WBA doesn't allow HASBRO, so not sure how that works. Not sure how that works for people who are just like, no, we should just do WBA. Okay.
And if legacy formats like those don't exist in the WBBA.
Exactly. Metal Fighters Burst will no longer exist in the WBBA shortly. Like, what is WBBA Burst? It doesn't exist anymore. Do we stop hosting it too? Like, how far do we want to go? And if we're drawing a line, where are we going to keep the line? Exactly.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like, okay, and it's not even that extreme of a take, because the premise is you should try to follow what Japan does for the WBBA. And if you take that logic to truth, then you cannot play plastics on the WBO. You cannot play Metal Fight, because you can't play Burst anymore. They don't host any more Burst events. I think, well, actually, technically, there's the Blade.
Yeah, I think they're still ongoing. I know Singapore's still doing them.
Yeah.
At the very least, but I don't know about Japan.
There's technically, but, you know, it's the silliest debate. But that's what I think Limited Unlimited does really good. And I'm going to give a quick TLDR summary, that way no one goes, oh, what does that mean? So Limited is basically the WBO version of how they want to handle the ruling and all that stuff, like most simplified, just to say it. And Unlimited is basically WBBA with maybe just some different stuff, but
it's quality of life, WBA. It's like, you know, Unlimited sort of like and anything goes, like an Uber's in Pokemon, and WBBA, and like the standard or limited, whichever way we go calling it, is our way of doing it, which means we can then take a more active sort of take on managing bans and stuff. So things where, you know, that there may not be game breaking, but are definitely meta warping, or just like overly dominant, like say Bearing Drift, which takes this lovely bag of things that would all be viable to like 4. All of these are viable. There's a few missing, and it takes you down to like Bearing Drift, Metal Bearing Drift, Metal Bearing Drift, and like maybe Mobius or Bearing Mobius. They're both kind of borderline. Like that's the point where we should be like, hey, this is a lot more accessible. We can get more people playing and more people winning if we allow this.
And the important
but
thing,
we still want to cater for people who want the full thing.
Yeah, exactly. You hit it on the nail. I think it's fine to have, and that's why I think I've always had the idea and the mindset of optional. I think optional is a lot easier to argue than definitive, because I don't think anybody can agree on definitive, and I'm sure you can probably get into a lot of debates on what people want to agree or disagree with, but this is like the most net positive, even if some think there are a few sacrifices that have to be made. Because like Bearing Drift to me, listen, if I got to go in an event and use it, I'll take those free points. I got no shame in it. I run double, I run Metal Bearing Drift, whatever, I got no shame. But if I have the option to do either, I don't mind. Or if Dan hosts the option, let's say BST, but BDR is banned, and like MBD, okay, I'm still going to go to the thing. And you'll have to realize that it's true too that if someone spends the money, there has to be value there. I agree to like a certain extent, but we also have the option for like true diversity. And diversity is not just playing multiple combos, because then I could just I made this joke. I like, was it like pick 10, choose 5 or whatever, right? Or like pick 20, choose 10, right? Having a lot of number of combos doesn't necessarily imply diversity. What implies diversity is like the hierarchy of drivers. And even in my tier list, if I redid the BU tier list, I'd probably put BDR and MBD like S plus. Because like
S plus, and then everything else is just like, you can go in A, I guess.
Because people don't also realize like why didn't they ban in Japan? Because in Japan, their meta is the DB Stadium, and the hierarchy of drivers is a lot different. High extend plus dash can actually work there. Bearing Mobius is a lot better in there because of the height and how it stands on top. A lot of driver hierarchy.
Even ZNZ is better in there.
Yeah, and people don't factor this in for the meta. So what I think is really good, like we just discussed, is just the benefit of this. I do hope it eventually gets approved. This is like the easiest thing for everyone in the community to say yes to. Like, if anyone can host, if they are listening, for the love of God, host it, right? Because once we get to Beyblade X, the biggest benefit we're going to get is, hypothetically, let's imagine there's like another Death Scyther problem where Death Scyther in the original burst, it was very dominant for stamina. And I think we only factored it in when Japan started to ban it. But hypothetically now, let's say there's some Death Scyther. WBO can be like, that's out of here. But unlimited, you can still play if you want to, and you can still host. And the benefit is it appeases the rank heads where they only want rank. I don't know if I should say rank heads, but it appeases those people who want rank. And I think it makes the community a little bit more healthier, because that way there's a little bit less restrictions on people, I feel, for how they want to play the game.
Exactly. And if you think you solved the problem, like you think you have the Death Scyther counter or whatever, you can host the unlimited tournament. It can be a ranked tournament. Everyone can attend, and you can show that it's not a problem now. You have the ability to do that, have it ranked, and not have just be running these unranked test events that people, for whatever reason, just don't seem to show up to. It gives you the option there. And I know people have all these concerns about rank, and I am writing a piece. I don't know if it'll be something I post publicly or something I just post to staff on this, because I think there's a big conversation to be had internally, and I don't know if it's something that I need to bring into public debate or not. I probably will. But the idea of rank, about how strict we are and what it's measuring, is something I think we need to have a big conversation over, because I was surprised when I came back that they split MFB and Burst at all, because we never split Limited and Metal Fight and Metal Fight Standard, and they're very different games. God, are they different games. Speaking form instead of parts, it should be optional at best. Metal Fight Standard with rubber defense flat. That's been a problem for years. It hasn't been solved, and it's been caught in back and forth. And this is the best way to solve it. The only concern people have is oh, well, it's the same ranking system, but I mean, it's closer than Classic and Standard. It's closer. It's not that it's a deal, but it's just another sort of limited format. It's not like a groundbreaking change. And
plus, too, the rankings thing is just a complete, I know you're just talking about in the context, but even rankings is just a separate issue entirely that people people have to realize. One issue is how we ban the stuff. The second issue is paying some guy to do the science. Those are two different things. So and a lot of people have offered resources. I know Cake, I know I have offered, and probably a bunch of others have offered help and resources, and that's that's something down the road to handle. But the biggest thing I think the WBO kind of does, but also is kind of a detriment because of how fast it actually goes to ban, is the ban list, right? Or the watch list, whatever, right? Okay, I will be honest. Very rarely have I seen it worked truly effective. I mostly see it something's there for 10 months, and I'm like, is it still there? Well, God, we're watching it, right? But if you have the thing now where you can just ban it, and then after you can have it where it allows it, okay, well, the thing is banned. If people want to do the watch list format of the sense where it's limited in the parts are banned, they can try to do that out. If the thing is okay to be allowed, there can be modifications. And the process it's Crisis, honestly, again, hats off to Crisis for probably the best suggestion I have seen on the
absolutely
WBO
amazing
in the longest time.
When Crisis hits, man. He and I, we have disagreed a lot, and when we argue very violently. Right. But man, when Crisis hits, he's one of the best. I have a lot of respect for the man, and there's a reason he's number 4. Yeah,
he very good suggestion, and plus it is overall benefits, but we kind of covered the WBO, and I want to kind of just cover the plastics base, pun intended, on it. Yeah. Which was just for a lot of you who maybe want to get into kind of maybe plastics or HMS, other than obviously your resource, where do you recommend they kind of search to kind of purchase stuff, and how do they purchase? Is Mint the right way to go? I know the answer, but it's for the general audience. Lots, right?
Unless you want to pay 10 times as much. Lots are like, you can get a plastic lot and just have a bunch of stuff to play with. And the fun of plastic isn't necessarily winning, it's the fun of messing around with them. Like the fact that you have combos that have like 15 parts instead of like 5 is the point is you buy a lot and you play around with the stuff in it. You can find those on eBay, Mercari, US and Japan. Mercari Japan is what I use. Yahoo auctions as well. I don't do that because auctions make me nervous. I'll pay a little bit more to not stress and to know what I have. But Yahoo Japan auctions is how I built a bunch of my collection back in the day. But yeah, like lots on Mercari and Yahoo Japan auctions are a great way to just start building that collection and get a ton of stuff at once for a really good price. Plastics is actually secretly really accessible because that used market that's there is pretty cheap. It's cheaper than a new burst bay to get like a used plastics bay. And
that's something I wanted to touch on. Just a second, just because I think it's technically easier to get into the plastics than it would be to get into older burst. And the reason for this is because with how burst designs itself, because the teeth there's a lot more potential in scalp properties for older stuff. And because a lot of like the plastogen, that culture kind of, different people grew up with it in Japan kind of a little bit older, it's a little bit easier for people to get rid of. I think technically, it actually does go plastics, maybe metal fights limited, then after like burst standard and maybe the rest. Because burst standard obviously is going to be the most accessible because that's what's currently going on. I think what you mentioned with Mercari is very true, and this is because I did the birthday stream on the Friday, and a lot of stuff I got was, some was Yahoo auctions, but a lot of good deals on Mercari. Like I got like 2 leopards, one cool recolor, and the Evo, like 800 yen. And
I know, they're so cheap.
The important thing is keeping your eye on it, because even for rare stuff, there could be potential it's either in lots. And there's other places, even though it's kind of, the shipping is kind of a bit much, but Mandarak also is a place that works kind of for Mint if someone wants to. But I think there's kind of
you can even just bundle them together.
And something
like the middleman from Japan's great.
Something you touched on as well is that there is kind of a little bit of negative sentiment towards plastics. I think because people think because it breaks, I was guilty of this. No, plastics is pretty accessible. I think HMS is where the pay gap is. That's like the middle class to the upper class of bladers for affordability.
Yeah, mate. HMS is just beyond. Though, weirdly, Metal Fight Standard, some stuff there hits HMS prices for God knows what reason. HMS is hard, but the only thing keeping that generation afloat is the Three Kingdoms stuff right now. You can get really good stuff for cheap on AliExpress, but
AliExpress,
that's rough.
Yeah, but
HMS, it's by Death Gargoyle on AliExpress and run with it.
Yeah, I talk to Dan a lot. So anytime I talk to Dan's like, listen, I know you like the anime, but he helps me out on all like the stuff, so like avoid it. Even though I'm kind of like anime casual in the sense because I finished all the seasons, so I got like the anime brain. But I think something just to quickly touch on before we talk about Beyblade X and then wrap up is just, I think what makes plastics, I think the strongest out of the 3 generations is what you can actually do, and I think the power creep. Because plastics is the most balanced Beyblade because everything is around the same way. Not like what the HASBRO does on their garbage on bursts, how they balance, but like actually like balance. Like
everything's equally depressing.
Similar. And I just thought like, damn, because there's so much incentive to have older stuff and new stuff where it makes sense and it's organic. Like you can have Dreer S, Galleon, like from the original at the start, and those things can still work out. There's stuff later on that still works. And the reason why I think it works so well is how experimental plastic was. And I know Nizuma, shout out to Nizuma, who talks about this too, about the information, but like, like the ways that you can experiment with all the bays, and because TAKARA TOMY was definitely experimenting, because Beyblade as model kits is like such a crazy thing to think of now, and how complicated it is.
Exactly.
And I definitely think it's a culture thing in Japan, because model kits are very popular, like with Gundams and assembling. I definitely think because, you know, the kids change and kind of like that demographic kind of shifts a bit slightly, that's when they got a little bit less complicated. And I have nothing against Burst at all. I think Burst could have done, had they figured out a better way to do Burst, which Cake has been very vocal and very right on how they mistakenly did how they did bursting. But, you know, because the goodest segue for this is Beyblade X, because we know they're going to be bursting, right? So what I kind of want to ask you is, because you have, first of all, and this will be two questions, because first of all, what was your favorite generation? And taking that into Beyblade X, what is your wish list for what you want them to implement into it?
Okay. So my favorite generation is plastics. That probably won't surprise people. Metal Fight Limited. So Metal Fight up until the Maximum series, very close second though. Big fan of it. Really good system. Really well balanced. They just went off the rails when they hired, I've forgotten his name. There was that one guy they hired who did all that design for that stuff, and ruined it, and he's my mortal foe. But definitely plastics. And what I would like to see with Beyblade X is separating weight distribution, like plastics, weight distribution being customizable, evenly balanced, so you can have like a smaller, so, you know, you have your heavyweight disc, which weren't as wide, but they were heavier, so they made up for it and let you do things with like your RPM, how well you maintain your spin and so on. Have that be customizable and separate from your contact points. You get a bit of this in Burst, but then it also affects the life after death and all this other stuff. I want it to just be that. And I would also like, you know, deeper customization in Beyblade X. So being able to, like, I'd love model kits to come back, and I know they never will. But I would like that deeper customization to be present.
Or even just figuring out ways to separate it. Like, I thought something else also. Metal Fight, I think, did this the best that HMS did not do, which was heights. I think heights is also such an
heights are good
idea. Because the variance in bays for height matchups is something very interesting. They probably wouldn't if they want to go kind of similar premise of just like the base bottom. I would be also okay with that. I think Burst actually, at least for the original ones, they're kind of close in the sense of plastics, where it kind of was like a plastic on the top, a metal weight disc, and then after your bottom piece. I think where Burst failed is because with how they do Beyblade, they put themselves in this issue where they have to power creep, because something has to get heavier. They have to slap in gimmicks. Yeah,
they really do. They like, I love classic because it is similar to plastics in a way, aside from the burst gimmick, which I don't really like. But yeah, they've done, you know, they were getting closer, and then it just feels like every time they're like, oh, sales are dropping, let's just put out some new horribly broken thing. You know, we'll dump out like a Surprise and Requiem, or I don't know what the first broken thing was, Maximum Garuda maybe, and we'll make this big thing to just to sell some product. And it's like, geez, you don't have to. Plastics did fine. Like, we managed for 3-4 seasons. Yeah, so they sort of reached that point where they had to, like, they felt that they keep needing to sell these products by just making them overpowered, and that's how they're going to take the next step. And I just don't think they need to. I really don't think they need to do that. They just need to keep them interesting. Plastics just introduced magnets. Just such a basic thing. I didn't have to be overpowering, but it was just cool. Like, you can just sell things because they're a cool idea. Because
I wanted to feel that there wasn't too much of a creep with Beyblade Burst God until kind of near that one point, like Requiem, Garuda kind of, but they were pretty balanced single and dual layer. And
yeah, they are.
I thought to myself, I'm like, if the first generation could do it where almost everything is on an even playing field, I think they can do the same. And the reason why this is actually a good idea than what they currently have is that people have an incentive to buy older stuff, because let's say I'm a guy who just wants to go all the way till the end that WBBA allows to. Then if I want to get older stuff, I'm like, well, how many parts are actually useful from the older stuff? Like in Burst, for standard, barely anything. Like the bearing driver, extreme, quick dash. Yeah. Destroy's kind of cap, but you can say destroy. You know, like barely anything endgame. And like, Metal Fight also is pretty, well, before the Maximum series, and also Gravity. Also
it was
Gravity,
like dead even.
But
Gravity's fine.
I think what I want to also hope for Beyblade X is a decent balance, because like I've been to Japan and I've seen this where releases suffer because they're garbage and there's no reason to buy it after a certain point. Like Japan hates Zillion Zeus, Beast Behemoth, what is it, Holy Horror Suit? Like a lot of some of like those random like dual layer stuff, and it's like to see them on those shelves years later, that is so
I know.
sad.
It is in Malaysia. Like when I went to Malaysia recently, shout out to my peeps in Malaysia and Singapore. When I went there like last year, it was so bizarre. There's stuff going back like to that era almost, and you're just like, how is this still on the shelves?
And
like at that point, there's no reason to buy them.
Yeah, there's also in the context, because I think in Korea and some Asia regions, I know they're kind of like a year behind. I'm pretty sure a couple months behind, because I remember Papa Bay, I remember he doesn't have exactly, and now he's up to date because all the stuff is there, I'm pretty sure, but beforehand, there's a little bit of a delay. And even there, you see a lot of stuff that kind of gets held up. And part of it is also kind of like at the fault of the marketing, because Burst went on as possible because they were selling. And people try to, because I don't know if you saw the statistics, but I think it was like Plastics is like 160 million shipped, Metal Fight was 190 million shipped, and Burst was 170 million. But people don't realize, even though 170 million is less than 190 million, Burst prices are higher than Metal Fight. So Burst was making more profit. And it was funny, actually. It was just this kind of a derail, but this is funny because I did the video. I told a joke to my dad. I'm like, you're going to get some stupid Metal Fight fans. You can't do math. And they're going to think 190 million is more than 170. And they're going to think, oh, Metal Fight's the best. And I unironically got those comments. I thought at first it was a joke, but then after I replied and they did say that, I'm like, oh my God. But Burst consistently sold well. And the fact that Burst did something people forget, which was survive during COVID, which was the worst time to do anything. It's a tournament killer.
Anything competitive.
Yeah, people can't afford the stuff. They got to worry about themselves, groceries, all this stuff. The fact that Burst went through sparking, also the worst time for the meta to get to DB and BU.
Lucky that was during COVID, though.
Yeah, lucky
no one
during
had to
COVID.
Play it.
I think hypothetically, if there was no COVID, I think we would have even gone past BU plus whatever they would have done, because the sales only go down because there's a lot. And you talk to a lot of people like Papa Bay Show, Mac the Burst, a lot of people in the Asia region, and COVID affects a lot the scene because people don't want to buy the base, they can't. But Beyblade X has the most, where I'm getting to this, right, on this long rant, Beyblade X has the potential on two things. One, even if this stadium, I'm kind of waiting to see in the point system, which I'll ask you your thoughts on the point system in a second. I still want to see how they handle the gameplay and balance, because there's no way TAKARA TOMY was sitting there in the office, okay guys, we need another billion, do Beyblade. They had to have this thought out, because the only reason why there is a gap in each generation is because the system differs. Plastics went to HMS, kind of, but it was mainly Plastics, and they're doing some weird like beetle bug thing, whatever, at the end, right? But that was this whole system thing. A few years later, Metal Fight is completely different from whatever they had before. A few years later, Burst is completely different. But because Burst made them the most money and was the longest running, nothing ever got canceled for Burst, not a single thing, and that is the biggest feat that Burst has ever had, that we have done it to the end. They even did a remake set. They should have done more, but they did even a remake set of like the V2s on like V-Force. They even touched G-Reds what they should have in 4D season, but they managed to do that. So the fact they're doing Burst now means they're confident in the system. I don't think it'll burst the same. I think they'll burst some way, but I don't think it'll be the same thing where you lock it together, because that would just be the same gameplay. Yeah. And the marketing, everything implies, even though it is kind of like, typical, this is the best, we're going to top the rest of them, right? But
that's so, the marketing for X is so flash. I love it. I'm eating it up.
was
It's
going
like
to ask.
the edge. It's like all the edgy stuff from back in the day.
Yeah, they're just doing all the X in the X market. What I wanted to ask, actually, just to end off, because we talked about the system, all this stuff. What are your? I know the points aren't technically confirmed, but to give a recap to viewers who are listening, from a trusted source who's told me and who's seen a video of it, the point system is supposed to be the 5's not confirmed, but it should be up to 5, 1 point OS, 2 burst, and then afterwards they're like 3 KO. What are your three knockouts?
Oh, that scares me. That scares me because I think for a balanced game it should be 1-1-1, maybe 2 because 2 for the, or you put the flashiest thing highest, but that makes me worry that it's going to be rarer.
No,
that scares me. But it'll depend how they're doing it.
Here's what I was thinking, because burst was the most amount of points when they did this. It was 1-1-2. Okay, burst at the start was pretty common. So RKO's common is what I was trying to think. I think they designed this stadium with everything in mind. I don't think the stadium's going to be perfect per se, but what I think personally is they had to think about this. And I think if it's done right, I think the stadium could be a very smart design for longevity, because burst's biggest problem is that people just don't want to use attack. Whether or not they suck at attack, to be blunt as possible, or the rubber hardness maybe, and because the bays are heavier in the launch strength, maybe because on the burst end it's a little bit tough. Okay, that's valid, but if maybe the stadium can work, because they've done this before. I can at least count to the 2 generations where they've designed an entire system based on a gimmick stadium. Magnacore, it was experimental. Zero Gravity with 0G, where the salad bowl kept moving around.
I love 0G.
I think how they're applying it is definitely inspiration from HASBRO on the kind of design, on the path divider. I think the solution could be in the future for stamina problems, that if attack is this strong, let's say hypothetically like stamina is pretty hard to burst or something. Let's say stamina is good. Maybe I'm giving too much benefit of the doubt, but I think they had to have thought about this. There is no way they did not think about this. And you know what the best part about the points is? Ask me what the best part about the points is.
What's the best part about the points?
Is that the WBO, if they approve limited and unlimited, if people don't like the point system, they got the WBO points ruling and the WBBA. That is what's really good. But I think we covered a lot of good bases. If you want to ask anything at all, if you have anything else, otherwise, like the floor is yours to pluck at the end. I know you have a YouTube channel. Actually, hold on. Before I get to the end, I almost forgot to ask this, because this is like the best thing you ever did. You did like 200 videos on like Flame 230 CS, because I think it was some meme, whatever. It said it wasn't able to be KO'd. So this is the
pasta, and then Burrito encouraged me.
Beyblade, better than Beyblade Geeks, Peter Pig, Eleanor, better than Drago Galaxy, better than anyone, better than me. Did like 200 videos or like plus, where it got every single possible attack type that you could probably there's like technically infinite, but you know what I mean. To KO Flame 230. Can you just tell me about that? Because that's like the most interesting thing I almost forgot about as we ended off.
So when I came back, I was kind of shocked that people were scared of this. It's really tall, and so it's kind of scary to like, especially if you're a bit new to the format. And then one day I think it was Pasta said, "Oh, this is unkillable," and Broito told me about it, and then I saw him say it again. So I made a video, and there's all this talk about attack not being the top choice in limited, which is very much designed to be the case. That attack is really good. So I recorded this video of Pegasus beating a ton of defense types of all kinds, including Flame. And when Flame came out, Flame got knocked down. I was like, see, totally unkillable. And then people kept saying it, so I just posted a random video of something knocking it out. And so then I decided, you know what? I was going away to Malaysia, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it with everything. I'm going to prove exactly how unkillable this thing is. So I did everything. Every single thing limited and legal, everything in 4D, and the one relevant 0G combo. And like some like bonus meme ones I did, like with the plastics. No, but I thought that was really funny because I remember like even like shout out Swift MFB, by the way, but he did like some joke where it was like Fang Harusius or whatever. I forget what it was, but it was like, oh, this thing is 1 in 100 chance to work. And I did like the video. I'm like, what are you talking about? And
it's just
Oh god, that.
like the most important thing to I think end off with is that don't necessarily believe word of mouth. Like to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Like if a skilled player, like say Kay says something, you, me, Din, you know, Cake, etc., right? If they say something and I'm like, okay, I'll factor it in. But the most important thing with Beyblade, and I do this more, and I'm very blunt when I say this, unless it's like recommended to what to purchase, is that I do not care what anyone says for what they want me to use. In the sense, like, I want to use what I want to use to win. Because people do this thing where then they get boxed into thinking, oh, don't use Barricade on Moon Unite Dash. It sucks. Why would you use Unite Dash? Why would you use Moon? Well, I won with it. So
if it works, it works. The
important thing is, it's creativity. And also the other thing, too, that makes so unique with Beyblade, as we're going to end off, and then after you'll plug, is that creativity is limitless in this. And also the most important thing, I don't know if we said or not, is player application. Because not everyone can do the same thing. There are some players like 1, 2, 3, 4 Beyblade who will have some godsend launch and will win every attack match. There could be people like Kay who do very skilled stamina type matchups and know how the stuff works to do sweep. Like players it's like a fighting game almost. Like players have like different advantages over each other, right? And that's what I think the beauty in Beyblade is.
And I think that's why you need options. You got to account for what your region's good at.
And now this time we do the plug properly. Okay, if you have anything else at the end that you want to talk about or just plug it, the floor is yours.
I don't have much else to talk about. I think we've covered basically everything I care about, so I'll just go straight to plugging. I've got my website, obviously, plasticsdb.com. That's plastics plural, db.com. Which has everything you need to know about plastics, short of like an immediate buying guide, but you should be reading the descriptions anyway. I have my YouTube channel, which is PlasticsDB by Think, which has unkillable. I'm sure if you search unkillable, it'll show up. I also occasionally build guitar pedals under the brand name W2CFX. So W2CFX. I have an Instagram for that too that I figure I'll shout out because I also enjoy doing that, and that's my non-Beyblade plug.
Yeah, no, awesome. So send me a link. I'll make sure to put everything in the description. Also, I guess technically the WBO side too, I guess. But
oh yeah, I should probably plug the WBO. Get on staff there. Yeah, check out the WBO. If you didn't catch that through this discussion.
Yeah. Alrighty.
If you're from Perth, do keep an eye out because more tournaments coming soon.
Okay, yeah. Sick. And the community is very strong there. I know was it a streamer or whatever. I think I talked to you in the middle of fights. Very, very nice people there. And I think you have a very cool meta there.
Yeah.
Where everyone uses attack.
It's good. Yeah, a little bit stressful at times. I'd prefer to, have some things that I could knock out reliably rather than just head smashing everything. But hey.
Yeah.
Great people.
So, end off, I'll make sure to leave everything link in the description. Again, thank you for your time. And that's going to be it for now. Alrighty. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.